All right, well, thank you everyone for joining the October 19th Police Reform Commission meeting. Before we dig into any specific items, I want to do a quick roll call of commissioners to make sure that we have a quorum. So let's go through that first. And if you can just say present or here or acknowledge yourself verbally, that would be great. So I'll start. Robert Bobb.
Present.
Christy Lopez.
Here.
Elena Bell. No, Elena. Robert Bennett.
Present.
Kent Bass.
Here.
Samantha Davis.
Present.
Tina Front.
Here.
Pastor Delonte Golston. If he's on it. Herb Gray.
Here.
Emily Gunston.
Here.
Ronald Hampton.
Here.
LaShunda Hill.
Present.
Corwin Knight. No, you're here, Corwin.
Right here. I'm here.
Right there, okay. George Lambert.
Present.
Jeffrey Richardson.
Present.
Naike Savain.
Present.
Sultan Shakir.
Present.
Mignon Smith. No Mignon yet. Patrice Sultan.
Present.
And Kurt Vondren.
Present.
All right, we have a quorum. I'll keep tabs on if any other folks that didn't say they were present yet join later. And then I am going to turn it over to Mr. Robert Bobb.
Well, thank you and good evening, commissioners. I want to also thank the commission members for all of its hard work in the various committees. It's been enlightening over between the last meeting of our commission and the current meeting. I would like to move quickly into our agenda and introduce Alex Varshansky, who is the president of Impact Justice. They're the organization that we've employed to work with the commission for the next several months as the commission completes its report. We are very pleased to have Impact Justice working in conjunction with our commission and without any, further. We also sent out earlier to all members of the commission as well as to the public the information on Impact Justice, the type of work that it has done in the past. I'd like to turn this over to Christy Lopez to elaborate just a little bit further with respect to its work with our commission. And after Christy, we will turn it over to Alex to introduce his team and to assist us with how they're organized to work with the commission so that we're effective going forward.
Thank you, Bob. Yeah, I want to welcome Impact Justice as well, and just very quickly go over some of what we think they're going to help us with, and then turn it over to them. So as we've talked about in the past, we expect Impact Justice to work very closely with the committees, both to provide you sort of, substantive support in terms of helping you access particular expertise, summarizing materials that you need to review, as well as logistical support in terms of just helping you guys arrange any of the hearings, you get data that you need, that sort of thing. In addition, they'll play a coordinating role, helping all the committees work together. As we've already discovered, there's a lot of overlap, and there's always a tendency to want to work on everything in each committee. So they're going to help us with that aspect as well. They're going to sort of help us figure this out, a timeline for all of this, both in terms of kind of substantive milestones and sort of when we expect to meet those to keep us all on track. And then, of course, they're going to help us put all this together in a report. So you can expect them to be involved in all that and probably more, but I'll let them introduce themselves and tell you a little bit more about their expertise. And I think that I'm hopeful that you will find them as, you'll be as excited to have their assistance on board as Bob and I are. So with that, let me turn it over to Alex Wasansky.
Thank you, Christy. Good afternoon, good evening for those on the East Coast. My name is Alex Busansky. I'm the president of Impact Justice. We're a national innovation and research center with offices in Oakland and Washington, D.C. And I just want to start out by saying it's just an honor and a privilege to be able to work with all of you on this important endeavor. As someone myself, though I live in California now, I spent many years in Washington, D.C. I attended law school there, I worked there. In a variety of jobs, and my 3 daughters, who were all born there, all considered DC to be their home. So I have a little bit of a soft spot for being able to come back and to do this important work with all of you. Impact Justice, I don't know how many of you saw the announcement that went out last week or had an opportunity to go take a look at our website. But as I said, we're a national innovation and research center. And what does that mean? Right, research is a proxy for knowledge, right? We just don't pound our fists on the table, right? We actually try to think about like, what are the implications? What is the information telling us? How do we set directionality in the world? Someone might say, we try to listen to the scientists when we can, and sometimes you just have to follow your values in your heart to figure out what to do and what common sense tells you. We're also an innovation center. What is innovation? It's a word that you see bandied about in lots of places all of the time. Innovation to us is about risk and imagination, right? If we're going to sort of create the world we want to live in, if we want to talk about the way to get there, the things that need to be done, it means we're going to have to sometimes do some things that might be uncomfortable, that you might not always know exactly how they're going to turn out. And that sometimes you have to risk, quite honestly, failure, right? Or not achieving the ultimate goal. But it means that as an organization, we take on projects. I don't think this is quite one of them, that we really don't know how they're going to turn out. We really don't have an idea how they're going to go. So we dream up ideas, we pilot them, we test them, we put them out into the world. And as an innovation and research center, we work to foster a more humane, responsive, and restorative system of justice in America, right? So if you went to our website, you would have seen that we have the Restorative Justice Project that is working to use restorative justice in the criminal justice system around the country as an alternative to the current system, right? As the sort of de facto way to go, so that right now young people and transitional age youth never go through the criminal justice system. What does it mean to be more humane and responsive? We lead the Prison Rape Elimination Act Resource Center, trying to think about how and work on how do you eliminate sexual assault and sexual harm in confinement facilities across the country. What does it mean when you're getting out of prison? Because no matter how long you're in, and it's far too long for far too many people, what are you going to do about a job? What are you going to do about a place to live? So we have the Homecoming Project, which is like an Airbnb for prison. We're piloting now out on the West Coast. How do you take people who have been in prison for a long time, 10 or more years, and put them into the extra bedrooms and homes of people who are left out of the sharing economy that aren't part of Airbnb or VRBO, pay those homeowners a relationship for people. And those are just, you can go to projects we have and initiatives that we've undertaken. And we also have a research and action center. One of my colleagues, Antoinette Davis, is part of this project. She's here. And as she would say, research action, the mission is in the title, right? So how do you not just do research, but how do you think about research and action and applicability? And what can one do? I think I might be breaking up a little bit on your end. So I don't know what to do with the internet. Hopefully it will correct itself in a minute. But if you're having any problems, please let me know and I can repeat or go back over it again. We have a track record of developing new solutions to longstanding problems, right? That's what we do. We work with government entities, government officials on the federal, state, and local level. We work with individuals, community-based organizations, formally system involved individuals, whether it's contact with the police, contact with the juvenile justice system, contact with DAs, the court system, in prison. We don't just sort of tilt one way. We're honest, we're candid, we tell people what we think, and we try to present the best information and the best ideas as trying to move things forward. For this project, we have a number of staff members. Many of them are on this call right now. You can recognized yet, you have to help move this forward. People who have experience in community, people who have experience as researchers, people who have experience and are working in law enforcement, people who are working in data. How do you tell stories with data? Cost benefit analysis people who can help us understand the financial implications of what we can do. And for this project, we felt it was developing community-based alternatives to police enforcement, right? This commission isn't just about what can the police do, but it's as much about what shouldn't the police be doing. And if they're not going to be doing it, you need to have somebody else taking on that responsibility, and what might that look like, and what might that mean, and what are the implications for the community. You know, we know that there is an overcriminalization of Black and brown bodies in this country. We know that the way in which law enforcement is engaging with too many communities of color isn't working, right? People want to be safe, people want public safety, but they don't want it at any expense. They don't want it at the cost that we currently have to pay to get that to happen. So how do we figure out what that system looks like? What does it mean to be in DC and to be safe? What does it mean to be a member of the community in any ward in Washington, DC, and to think about what public safety means, what family safety means, what individual safety means, what justice means, what how people deal with one another in an appropriate way. So we're really excited to be part of this and to have the opportunity to begin our journey of working with you. Because our role, right, we're staff essentially, right? You're the commissioners. Our role is to help you as commissioners and as individually and as a collective body to reach its goal, right? And to do that, we're going to be spending the next couple of weeks working to learn the individual priorities and goals of each of you, because all of you come with a perspective, and we want to find out what that is. All of you have an idea of what success means to you, right? When you think about the conclusion of this commission work. All of you know what motivates you to show up in the evenings and weekends and all times of day to do the work that's needed for this commission, and you're not getting paid for it. We want to know what that is and understand that so we can help you as individuals and as a body work together. Already, before we've shown up, you've been extraordinarily productive. You've had a variety of meetings. You've written a charter. You've begun to hold hearings, right, where you have people coming forward, whether it's the emergency meeting as a result of the tragic shooting, or it's just having meetings to talk about the work you need to do. Some of those are done collectively or in small groups as the committees. Some of that's done as the whole commission. You have a structure, and our goal is to figure out how we can support that structure, which we think reflects your goals, and to figure out what the holes are, what the needs are, as Christy said, to help sort of move that process forward. So I could go on and on. Some of the people on this call, just looking at this screen, just to give you a quick sense, because we're all not going to speak, at least that's our goal. Marion Morgan, right, who is a police officer and then detective in Madison, Wisconsin for over 20 years before beginning work to eliminate sexual assault and sexual harm in confinement facilities, part of our law enforcement group. Antoinette Davis, who's the director of our Research and Action Center that I mentioned. She's phenomenal. You're gonna love them all, actually. Danny Soto, Dr. Danny Soto, I should say. Dr. Danny Soto is a PhD who works with Antoinette Davis on research. Aisha Youssef, who is director of our innovation programs, and maybe she'll have an opportunity at some point, not tonight, to tell you more about some of the work we do in that area, because it's really kind of quite extraordinary. Sia Henry, who's one of the senior program people currently on a restorative justice project, right? But also is a lawyer by training and by practice, having done work around conditions of confinement and advocacy and other work before and during her time at Impact Justice. Jennifer Trone, worked with Jennifer Trone for many years on a variety of projects. She's probably been the mastermind, the ghostwriter of about 4 different commission task force reports over the years. And it's not just a beautiful writer, but is a beautiful problem solver, right? Because all commissions are about personality and people and ideas and trying to figure out where there can be agreement and where there might not be agreement, right? But trying to sort of figure out what that universe looks like, and then trying to give both sides, or whatever number of facets there are, to give it voice. Michaela Bowman, worked with her on not just commissions, she's also the co-director of the Prison Rape Elimination Act Resource Center, has worked on our Building Justice project, and is probably really one of the most articulate and smart thinkers about justice reform and some of the needs that need to go on. A bunch of these people, some of them are already living in DC, some have lived in DC, and some certainly will live in DC again at some point. And there's more, but we will in the next day or two send out a list of who we all are, our contact information, and some more information about us. But I've gone on far longer than I intended to. I hope you could hear it all with the internet connection the way it is, but I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Bethany Young right now, who can go on. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. And we heard most of it. Only went out a few times, but we heard the important parts.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. Please call me Bethany first. I'm so excited to be here. I'm new to the Impact Justice team, but not new to the work and certainly not new to DC. I was born in DC. Washingtonians tell me not to claim it because I didn't go to high school there. But as all of you know, I was in you don't know this about me, but I lived in Maryland, grew up in Maryland, but that meant I was in and out of DC. My grandparents lived there. My church was there. I came back and went to law school there after going to Georgia for Spelman for my undergraduate degree. Worked in DC courts before moving down to Alabama to do work on death penalty advocacy, prison conditions, racial history, education, community building. Did some of that in Alabama. Law school wasn't enough. I went to North Carolina, got to more school. That's where I did my PhD at Duke, where I focused on stratification as it comes in the varieties of race, socioeconomic status, gender, and the intersections of all of those and how they work together to shape each of our daily lives and experiences, in particular of our youth. I had the opportunity after grad school to come back to DC to do work at a national think tank where I was responsible for managing a national grant consisting of multiple states, DOCs, university researchers, and advocacy organizations working on innovative reforms to the problem of prison in our country, figuring out ways and solutions to make the places in the condition that they are and to the extent that it is possible, more appropriate for human habitation. I am no stranger to tense conversations. You know, we were having conversations about abolition. We were talking with the DOCs in the room, not that that was our goal, but these were just tough conversations that we had with people who were around the table with us. I'm so eager to dig into this work with you all. You all are the experts. I am chomping at the bit to get to know you, to learn about your experiences, to learn about your love for DC and what you see for this city in the future moving forward. I think we are in an unprecedented time at which we can kind of do some pretty incredible things, or at least start talking about them. And I think that's really exciting. That said, to that end, you are the experts again. Our role here is to be the legs, to do the legwork, to do the digging, guided by what you've told us, what we hear from you. To that end, our kind of initial first next steps will be to reach out to you, each of you individually, to hear about your goals for this commission, your concerns, what challenges you anticipate that we will run into. We know that they exist. We have some idea of what they might be. We want to hear from you all. We want to talk to you, each of you commissioners individually. We want to talk to the committees. You want to hear from the committee chairs about the priorities for each of the committees you've established. Once we have a clearer picture of those priorities, those goals, those concerns, those challenges, our job will then be to figure out what research, what information, what additional resources do we need to move this project forward. We'll begin to frame research and testimonial evidence you'll need to make and to support your recommendations. We have an awesome team, as Alex has described, and as you will get to know over time. Our team will be assigned to each of your committees to provide that backbone, that support, that organization and coordination between and across committees. The role of these liaisons on the committees will be to make sure that each committee, again, has what it needs to reach a concrete set of conclusions. That means we'll advise the committees, we'll present research, data, and arrange for testimonial evidence when appropriate, and kind of do our best to make sure that we are on track while being methodical, really thoughtful and strategic, but also being really mindful of the real time, that time exists, and that, you know, the impetus to create this commission is kind of pushing us forward to get things done. So we have an eye on efficiency, but also doing it well and doing it right. The final recommendations and the written support for them will be yours. So we want to understand what you hope to accomplish with them. We have experience on this team working on commissions, supporting commissions, and then writing up the findings and recommendations. So we'll advise you depending on what we learn from you, again, about what your goals, concerns, challenges, hopes are. We will begin by aiming for some consensus, but if it becomes clear that that's not possible and is not a priority, we'll work with you to identify the most productive, authentic, and honest, transparent way for you as a group and individuals to report where there was dissent and then where there was consensus. We'll work on a timeline of tasks and dates to ensure that while working back from our ultimate goal, our ultimate deliverables, we have a process that will get you to the goal, to your goals in the time that you have. Again, I'm reading from some notes and we have an idea of how this is going to go, but just keep in mind that, this is a dynamic process. We have some plans, but I think I heard once, we plan and God laughs. So we want to be flexible. We want to be agile. We want to work with you and for you to make sure that we do this in the best, most complete way for the people of DC. So with that, I hear you guys may have some questions. So I'm going to open it up for that, if that's appropriate. Sorry, Mr. Bob, if I open.
Yes, I think that is appropriate. Members of the commission, if there are any questions that you would like to pose either to Alex or Ms. Young, please join in. This commission has not been shy in the past, so.
This is Bob. I guess somebody has to ask a question. Do you tell us when you think we're wrong and are going down, a street we shouldn't be going down?
I think wrong is a tricky word. I think intelligent, reasonable minds, which is the people in this room, can differ. I think our goal is to facilitate conversation and try to figure out where there is overlapping understanding and work from there. Again, we do have quite a bit of knowledge and experience on our team, but we acknowledge that, that so do you, and kind of hope it to be a more collaborative process than, no, this is wrong. If we think that there is maybe a more efficient way to do things or an additional resource or another sort of set of data or community of people or individuals that can kind of support or kind of help us figure out if the direction is the best one or the most appropriate, then we'll do that. But we are not at all entering into this, anticipating kind of that, correcting, but we do hope to kind of bring to bear all that we know and all we have access to, when there are differences of opinions, and I may think you're wrong or you may think I'm wrong, but kind of looking to what we know in terms of research, evidence, and practice to guide kind of resolution of those differences.
Thank you.
You all have seen reviewed the commission, the number of commissions that we have, as well as the charter for each of the commission. So can either one of you just express some thoughts with respect to how you might approach work with either a commission? You can pick and choose one of the 5 in terms of the staffing in that commission and perhaps what you've learned from some of your work in the past that they may relate to the work of some of any one of the committees. And that may generate a question or two from some of our commission members.
Why don't I just say something, and then I'm going to turn it over to Aisha too to give a sense of how the group we expect her to be working with will be. So look, one of the great things that you've done is you've gone through and divided yourselves up into a group of committees, right? We want to make sure that lines up with what's in the original enabling legislation that creates you. And that when we dive into this, that we make sure that we have the time and the resources to be able to tackle and to take on the sort of sub issues that you've identified within each committee, right? And to think about how, understanding that time is finite and that your time is finite too, how do we achieve that goal and get to the most salient, most important points? I think as an example, one of our theory is that this is sort of like a quilt, right? And that, the committees represent squares of that quilt. And there's other pieces to that quilt too, some bigger, some smaller. And that what we're going to do is sort of put people who, based on their experience and their work, onto each of those committees to work with the members of those committees. And that Bethany and the team really organizing all this will be the sort of clothing. I'm going to make a bad metaphor even worse, so I'll stop. But Bethany will be working with the various committee staff that we have to sort of help pull it all together to make sure that directionally it's all moving, even if there is disagreement in the directions that it should, that they're intelligent disagreements and it's moving in an appropriate direction, and then we can sort of bring this whole thing together. Actually, do you just want to talk about sort of your committee, for example, how that might look? And again, we want to sit down and talk to each of you to find out what your expectations are and not just impose on you some sort of artificial set of constraints or expectations until we hear from you. So take this as suggestive, not directive right now, but I should too.
Yeah. So hi, good evening, afternoon for everybody. So the committee in which I will be leading will be the School Resource Officer Committee, and I'll be doing that with Sia Henry, who is on this call somewhere. I can't see her face anymore, but is on this call. And as Alex said, the truth is the first approach to this is understanding what it is you want, understanding what it is you see as the problem, what do you see as some of the solutions for that problem, and what have you seen throughout your experience? Like as Bethany said, I respect each and every one of you, particularly on the commission that I'll be working directly with, as the experts in your field as it relates to that commission. And so I'll rely on you for that information. One of the first things that we're going to be doing, everyone who's leading the commission, is starting off asking every single commissioner a series of questions. One, getting to know you, getting to know your work, getting to know your place on this committee, and getting to know what it is you want to know from this committee. So that'll be our first step in all of that. Just like a quick 2 sentences about me, I guess. So as Alex said, I'm the director of the innovations programs, in which we have a portfolio of programs in which we get to look at the justice transformation and reformation, reform and transformation differently from innovative eyes. But prior to that, I worked directly with education, within education systems, working on school confinement pathways, but working directly with principals and superintendents regarding what's happening in their schools and disproportionate suspension, expulsion of kids, particularly kids of color. I've worked with law enforcement agencies and helping them write MOUs that work directly with the schools, and helping schools understand exactly what it is. Exactly what it is happening in schools. So, on this committee that is really about, police and youth, broadly speaking, I will be taking some of the things that I know, but most importantly, really working with you to understand what it is that our ultimate goals are. And again, like Bethany said earlier, there is no wrong or right necessarily. It's really about having a conversation and getting to the next steps and being able to finalize some recommendations or information for you all.
I noticed on your team, you have a number of law enforcement experts. How will those individuals be used as an overlay with respect to our various committees?
Like research, the work of the police, the role of police, the responsibilities of police, oversight of police, sort of permeates this entire discussion. And so while as you know from the structure of the committees that you've set up, that there are a few focused committees that really do look specifically at police training, recruitment, et cetera, and even the oversight and accountability of police, however that is envisioned, exist. We will be assigning some of our police experts to work specifically with those committees, but also to work with whoever needs that assistance, right? And to bring that perspective and that point of view, right? Because, to Mr. Bennett's question, right, there will be disagreements, but I think disagreements also provide an opportunity for information and discussion and dialogue. And, as Bethany pointed out, we have experience doing this, right? And I think by being able to have candid conversations with real expertise, even if you may not disagree with it at first blush, or even agree with it, you might agree with it at first blush and change your mind. I think it's that process by which you're able to move forward as a commission.
And if I may, I would add, I think it's critical to get a 360 view of what it is we're tackling. And I think that we can be that much more confident about what it is we find and come up with, when we have, such a vast range of voices in the room kind of contributing and a part of these conversations.
I think I saw Naike and then Jeffrey. Naike, were you gonna ask a question?
Thanks, Blaine. I was going to ask, I think, Alex, you mentioned a little bit of this, I guess so it's a partial response, but I was wondering how you selected who the assigned staffers were going to be per committee. Like, is there subject area expertise for the different staffers assigned to each committee? Yes,
right. We really tried to, we're a much larger organization than what you see here. And with consultants, we're effectively an extraordinarily large organization. So we were able to really draw on, talented people who really were appropriate for the work of this commission, right? And it's in a myriad set of ways. So for example, Sia Henry, who will be working, one of your mandates and one of your issues is restorative justice. We actually have an expert in restorative justice. We have a few in our organization. Sia happens to be one of them. So Sia is working on this project, right? We have law enforcement individuals. Some of them are consultants, working law enforcement officers, but we have people like Marion Morgan, who I introduced at the beginning, who we get her, lived experience working in law enforcement, her experience working within the institution of law enforcement, and her perspective after years of doing that we get to bring to this conversation. We'll also be able to bring in other, we'll call them witnesses, right? People who have a different set of experiences, perhaps a lived experience, perhaps an academic experience, perhaps a professional experience, to be able to talk with specific committees or as the commission as a whole, if that's appropriate, to bring that information. What we'll be doing in the next couple of days is putting together a list of the key staff that are assigned to the various committees, their contact information, and we'll also put their brief bios in there. If you go to impactjustice.org and you go to the About Us page, all the Impact Justice staff, you can read their bios right there. There'll be a photo so you can match it up with the Zoom screen and figure out who it is if you can't remember their name, and you'll be able to get that information. But our goal is to, as I said, we want to bring a level of relevant perspective and relevant experience to this, not just on how to work with commissions, but on the substance of this commission. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Jeffrey?
Yes, good evening, everybody. Excited to have the Impact Justice team on board and get going. My question is actually for Robert Bobb, and I guess maybe refer back to the Impact Justice team. But Robert, at our last meeting, we talked about potentially, there was conversation about using the master plan framework or template framework to put together an outline of sort of how the committees might feed into a document and information. And there was talk of sort of getting that skeleton outline of your firm or others. Will Impact Justice, is that be taking that on? Is that something that they'll immediately be working with, sort of putting that framework in place that we'll all be feeding into? Is that something that's been talked about?
Yeah, we'll take the first cut at it with the model that was used for the when the city put together its a revision of I think it's master plan or zoning codes, et cetera. That how the district worked with the various ANCs and neighborhoods. So we'll help put that structure together, and then we'll share that with Impact Justice and of course with the commission overall to see if that, how that works for us. Because as we stated earlier, some of our members of the commission stated earlier, as we move forward with some of our work, some of our recommendations will be completed. We, maybe writing a report and then have a final report. So we'll put together that structure in terms of a business process model with my company.
Okay, thank you.
So, Chairman Bob, George Lamb, I just want to raise a question with Alex. It really delighted the impressive team that you're bringing to certainly support us. But also, I always think that a good resource is, and you've kind of mentioned it, I'm just trying to get better clarification on it, is folks who've had the lived experience. And so on your team, I did want to raise anyone really not so much grassroots, but on the ground community person in terms of lived experience. Is that a part of your team as well?
Currently, so in our organization, we have a number of people with lived experience, formerly incarcerated people within the organization. Within the team that we've constructed right now, and I'd have to actually ask everybody on the team to know that answer about what has been their police contact, right? What has been their engagement, right? Good, bad, or indifferent with police over the years. But it is from a staff perspective, it's, I would say candidly, I think it's a little bit, we could do better. But I think one of the things that we do at Impact Justice well is we go to where we need to hear the voices of the people we need to hear from, right? I imagine when you look at just at the structure of your commission, there's probably holes in how DC is represented on your commission, right? How do we get those voices, right, into that commission, right? One staff member or two staff members on our team, candidly, can be helpful. But more importantly is understanding what the people of DC, what has been their experience, what are their essential hopes, what have been their challenges, what have been the problems that they've seen, right? Because otherwise we begin to bring, you have to be, I think, sometimes careful of trying to impose your own sense of what you think it should be, rather than doing the community work to listen. And Antoinette, I believe, is still on the phone. And Danny, you might want to talk about our approach to research and how we engage community in that and how that plays out. Antoinette?
Sure. I'm sorry, my internet is not great right now and there's banging in my home. So I apologize right now, but I just have to be transparent with that. But we do participatory research. We definitely engage with the community. I think that, just to be quite frank, it's hard. I'm a researcher. I've done research for about 20 years, but more than that, I'm a mother. I have a Black son, and I have a Black son who has experiences with the police all the time. I've had my own challenges, and I live in the suburbs. So I'm not in DC, but I live in the suburbs. And I think that that's the challenge that we have with most people, folks of color who are on this call. My team, we have a variety of folks, but in terms of thinking about the lived experience, we absolutely find it necessary to get the voices of folks who are in the community. We have advisory boards, we do things of that sort, but more than that, in terms of when we're collecting information, we're collecting data, we do it from a perspective that is community driven. We're not doing, well, and I don't know if this is as relevant with this committee, but what I've said to Mr. Bob before is that the work that we do, we want it to be user-friendly. We want it to come from a perspective that not only are we respecting the voices of folks in the community, but we're absolutely helping them to tell that story, and we're highlighting and things of that sort. So yeah, I'm sorry, I have a lot of stuff going on right now, so this is not the best, but yeah, so the whole thing is we do participatory action research, and I'm going to turn it over to Danny because I'm sorry, I don't have a lot of privacy right now.
I think honestly, you basically summed it up, Antoinette. I think what we do as researchers is we truly value the expertise of people with lived experience. I mean, that's another key stakeholder group that we have a lot of experience helping them to be able to tell their stories and synthesizing their stories to actually come up with findings, right? In terms of like, commonalities across experiences, and also gaining the insights that, that you get from direct experience. And so, although, as Alex said, on our team specifically for this project, there might not be, system impacted folks necessarily, but we certainly know how to draw on their experiences and on their expertise. And I imagine for this project, it's going to be especially important for us to, find those community-based organizations and find those, access points to speak with impacted communities in DC. And we are totally, I think equipped and prepared to do that.
Marion, I guess.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you, commission members. I have 30 years of law enforcement experience and 5 years working in the correction system, and I too am an impacted community member. I don't just bring my professional experience, I bring my personal experience with the law enforcement experience in my community and in other communities where I've spent time. So I want to share that because I think people have a tendency to, until you get to know someone, put you into a specific niche. And I think in particular, when you're talking about certain professions, that it's easy to identify or see that person in that context. But I am more than my professional experience in law enforcement. I'm an African-American woman who lived and grew up in this country. And I too have lived experiences with the law enforcement community. So I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did any other commissioners have questions? Have time for folks?
Well, I'll just say to Ms. Morgan, you're from my hometown of Madison, Wisconsin. So I might be stereotyping you, but stereotyping you as a very good person.
Well, that's one stereotype I think is true. She is a good person, maybe even a great person.
I have one final question, Alex, for you and your team, and that is, much of the work of the commission, in particular with some of our committees, will be having to address issues around youth and the juvenile justice system. Can you speak a little bit about the, what you all bring to any one of the committees that may be addressing some of those issues? What level of expertise that you bring or an approach to working with with youth to keep them out of the criminal justice system as well?
There's a couple of things I could talk about, but I think one, because it's relevant to your sort of enabling legislation, is restorative justice and our work. Sia, I'm looking for you. Are you still on the call? Perhaps not. Okay. If you are, you're on mute. So maybe we won't do restorative justice. I'm going to turn it over to Aisha too. Aisha, do you want to talk about California? I think both California justice leaders, and you can talk about restorative justice also. I think that might be sort of both go to that question. And yeah, I think particularly restorative justice work is very relevant for this commission.
Yeah, I'll just answer it briefly because I think that when we start to have one-on-ones with the commission members, we'll all be able to answer a lot of this in detail. I think particularly Dr. Danny Soto and Antoinette Davis, Sia, have all had extensive work in juvenile justice, particularly coming from both the research side to the recommendation side, from federal, state, police, school, so I think that juvenile justice is an area that many on this team, our consultants and actually Impact Justice broadly can really speak to. A few easy projects to bring up, our restorative justice work is really one of the most innovative projects actually, which is around pre-charge. So our projects, we really work with young people that have committed felonies, usually high crimes. We work to use restorative justice as a community-based model pre-charge. It's one of the we're in 9 counties, I believe 9 counties across the state right now. And we're working to expand rapidly. It's a model. There's a lot of restorative justice models out there, but ours particularly because we work with young people that have committed higher level crimes, and we work with young people on a pre-charge way. I think it's really one of those innovative models and how we really look at that. Some of our other projects, your California Justice Leaders Project, is really about providing reentry services to young folks that are leaving California's Division of Juvenile Justice and other county facilities. But really what the project is doing is providing, support to folks who have been incarcerated as they kind of go into their professional journey, and using that experience to be a credible messenger for other young people and that have experienced juvenile incarceration or they're being touched by law enforcement. We both, in that project, we work directly with law enforcement because we're working literally with the young people that have been touched by law enforcement in different ways. And then, you know, so I think at Impact Justice, we've, the gamut of the juvenile system has really been touched, from probation to police to what's happening inside detention halls to outside to, you know, just to go back to a comment that was asked earlier about some of the folks on the ground. So I think George asked that. So I can tell you, George, I have absolutely been on the ground and interviewed police officers and young people and folks that have been incarcerated, both juvenile and adult. So as my personal experience has not been experienced incarceration, I've worked with many, many people who have and come from a family who've also experienced that. So I can tell you very, very clearly that the expertise is really broad at Impact Justice. And again, we're happy to bring consultants on whenever necessary if there's an area in which we need to have a deeper conversation about.
Blaine, I guess my final question would be, back with Ms. Young, I think Ms. Young indicated that she had the experience of working within K-12 education, because one of the charges of our committee is, and it's in our legislation, is to address the issue as to whether or not to remove police officers, you know, from the school system and provide other more impactful services for youth in the school system. So perhaps just a brief on experience that you all may have had with those types of services as well.
Sure. So my experience in schools with youth have been looking at, kind of from a research perspective, disproportionate school discipline, and particularly as it relates to Black girls, and kind of some of the behaviors or kind of the things that get targeted or the things that get called out, and kind of the disparities in perception even of youth of color, from adults in general, but from law enforcement in particular. I did work when I was practicing law. I did work on juvenile justice representation in the context of extreme sentences, life without parole sentences. But in the schooling context, my experience has been on the research side, kind of examining the data that exists for school systems. I did some work, civil rights investigative work for the Department of Education, looking at school districts and their rates of out of school discipline and the disparities that existed there. So I'm familiar and comfortable talking about those issues. As Aisha too has mentioned in describing her own experience, that knowledge and that skill and that experience working in schools and on schools in that context is pretty deep on our team.
Thanks. Christy, do you have any questions?
No, I don't think I do. I saw Antoinette's hand raised though, so I want to make sure she didn't have anything to add.
You know, we've moved on, but I was going to add something about the restorative justice work, but I'm not sure if that's okay. I just wanted to say that one of the things that we have seen, so with the work that I've completed with police officers, with probation officers and folks in that system, they've consistently asked us what are some of the, and community members, honestly, let's not forget that. And the community have been the people who have really been pushing to do something different. But restorative justice is like one of those components. So when we're saying, what can we do to help keep youth out of the system? And these can be youth who've done things that are serious. So the restorative justice model that we are using has been shown to be very effective with youth who've committed serious to violent offenses. Much of the work that we've seen, there are some things that have happened where we're seeing that people who've committed low-level offenses are kind of pushed out of the system. So there are other ways to deal with them without connecting them directly to the justice system. But restorative justice has been very effective with working with people and some of the kids who've done some of the more serious things. So that's a really viable model. And we've seen really, really great results with that project and that model. And we are working to scale it. So that's what I was going to add to that part of the discussion.
It looks like Samantha, you have a question? And then I see Tina as well.
Antoinette, I'm glad you went back to restorative justice because my question had to do with that. Was curious about, you all are speaking a lot about restorative justice and certainly not a new approach, but new, I guess, evolved thinking that some of my work and the youth organizers I work with have been thinking more about and being more intentional about is not just restorative justice, but pushing us further to think about transformative justice and dealing not only with the individual relationships, but also with the social and often systemic structures that cause the harm in the first place. And so curious about the work you all have around transformative justice models and what that looks like. And then also curious about, in terms of just working with the community and doing participatory research with community members, especially when we're talking about policing, oftentimes the experience you hear are very individualized and focused on, right, like individual relationships with the police officer. And so curious what approaches you all take to translate those individualized experiences to more of a systemic change. And anyone can answer that.
If I can take the part B of your question, then I may pass it off to Antoinette or Danny to take the part A. In terms of participatory research, our goal as researchers is to get individual stories and to hear from people about what's happened to them and what they've observed, but then we aggregate it, where our goal is to get, large enough samples to be able to draw conclusions or kind of paint a picture, at least a descriptive one, about the things that we're hearing. So kind of the power that we have with our research expertise is kind of being able to access enough people at a level where we can kind of draw a pretty good picture about what the kind of high level reality is, and then less kind of on a granular basis. But we do see value in kind of having those individual descriptive stories kind of to give some color to what it is we're finding at a high level. I think that's the beauty of being able to do more qualitative research where we're doing interviews and focus groups and hearing people's stories in their own words in combination with the more traditional, straightforward survey data, that these individual stories kind of give us some of the color that we kind of hear the emotion, the passion, kind of what people have actually, what their lives have been like, while being able to kind of get that more aggregated picture of the more aggregated, bigger picture.
Yeah, and I would just add, I could give a couple of examples of projects that we're working on. And just to be transparent, I do work on, I'm the director of the Research and Action Center. So I focus more so on research, but we consistently work with community-based organizations. So when we're developing tools, when we're going over results, we include folks, from the community in that. So it depends, who we're studying. If we're working with youth, if we're working with direct service folks, we're including them in our research design. We include them as we interpret the results and things of that sort. And I do think that, some of the traditional structures of research have pushed that away, but I think it's really important because when we're talking about findings and what do things mean, what's applicable, what are the priorities, and going over some of that stuff, it's really important to include the people who are, I don't want to say the subjects, but who are the folks who are impacted by this into what we're doing. We have a project right now where we're doing we're working with one of our it's not a local, but it's a California sponsored foundation. And we're looking at women re-entering the community from incarceration. And there are specific, some actually fairly well-known folks who are providing services to them. And I can just say like Carol Burton. So Susan Burton. So she's, some of you may have read her book, Becoming Miss Burton, but she does some fabulous work with women in the community who are re-entering from prison. So in terms of doing this and surveying these folks and interpreting results and so forth, we're including them in what we're doing. We're sharing our protocols. We're sharing our surveys. We're talking to them about what's important. Are we looking at the right things? So I think that there are really tangible ways to include the community and the folks who are impacted by these systems when we're collecting the information. In terms of some of the, I love what you're saying about transformative justice. just to be quite frank, I believe I've been doing research and working in this field for about 20 years. And this has been a call from the community. And I absolutely think that this is something that has been pushed forward from advocates. We talk about at times, I would just say we don't need to reinvent the wheel. I think that there are folks who are on the grassroots level have been talking about this for quite a while. They're talking about wellness indicators. What does it mean to succeed? Thinking about some of the credible messengers. So, things of that sort. So we have worked with community-based organizations that are doing this. And honestly, it's been more so from a support position of support. So we may support them in collecting information, collecting data so that they can tell their own story. We highlight that a lot. I talk to organizations about telling their own story. There are absolutely aspects of data that you will need to collect for your funders. If you're working with private funders as well as federal funders, you're going to need to collect some information, but it's also important for them to be able to tell their own story. And so we do see people who are doing this. We do see a movement in the field where we're talking about not just restorative justice, but transformation. And what does it mean? It includes the spirit and all of those things. So we're also helping folks to be able to operationalize, to put meaning to things that are not necessarily as tangible and quantifiable. So we talk about wellness. If we're talking about what does it take for a youth to do well? And many, and I see this in the Latino community, I see it in an African-American community where we're talking about spirit, we're talking about rites of passage and all of those things. So we're not directly doing that work, but we're absolutely supporting organizations who are moving in that direction, and it's a big part of who they are.
Yeah, and if I could just come back to the first part of your question, because I don't want that to be lost in all of this, right, about restorative justice and transformative justice. So what we do is not, so our restorative justice project is not transformative justice. And there are a number of definitions out there for transformative justice, and there's certainly many, many definitions out there for what restorative justice is, right? We don't think that post-sentence conversations is restorative justice. We don't think that harm reduction harm circles in prison is restorative justice, right? Our restorative justice model, and Sujata Baliga, who you may know, is the real sort of creator proponent of it, building on Indigenous experiences in New Zealand and other places internationally, and working with an amazing team today to bring it to these 9 sites that Aisha was saying, is really embedded in some ways that ties to and is part of, I would say, transformative justice, right? It happens pre-charge. So you never go to the DA's office, you never go to the courthouse, you never go to jail or a juvenile prison or an adult prison if you go through the program. It is led by and run by a community-based organization, people in community. It envisions a world where both people may end up in that initial pathway because of police contact, but it may be that Antoinette and I have an issue between our kids or between ourselves and we want to get it resolved. We could go to that community-based organization and they could take our case and we could resolve that, right? You know, this work that the commission's going to do is going to be about, as I said at the beginning, as much about what should be done as about what could be done. What are the holes? What are the different ways to think about community? Right, community is going to be the key to your work. That's what all this is about. You're a community citizens commission, and trying to think about what are the other systems? What are the other harms? How can one address those harms? How can one ostensibly repair those harms? We have to figure out what you have the capacity to take on and to address, right, and to get through successfully. But as you can tell, I think from a number of the comments by my colleagues about the work that we do, it's really community that we lead with, right? It's really people that we lead with. We are not in an ivory tower. We are not locked in a basement without any sunlight, right? We are trying to be responsive, right, to the people who need voice, or a stronger voice, and try to channel that, and trying to find ways, both as staff, both as the way we do our work, both who we partner with, both the projects we take on. And so and you can read more about our restorative justice work. There's a toolkit for communities, right, on the website, impactjustice.org. It's the place to start. And I think that will answer some of your questions. We can also, I thought Sia was still here, but she's not. But next time I can have her, you can sit down, you can talk with her and she can explain it in certainly a clear and coherent way, far better than I can. But
What's the difference between transformative justice and the other?
Ms. Davis, do you want to take that one on?
I really cannot
No,
do
no,
a great.
I was thinking of Samantha
Yeah.
Davis, not Antoinette Davis.
Oh, good, because I was
You
going to
asked the
say, I
question.
can't do that. Yeah, because I
Ask about-
like to give it a really
Sorry
coherent.
about that.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, the
Thanks.
difference
I'd
between
say I would actually be interested to see how you all made
Yeah.
between the two.
So if we can just put a pin in that conversation, because I'd love to just explore more with you what you're thinking, so we have some understanding, and also for you, Mr. Bennett, and for the rest of the commissioners to be able to come back with you and give sort of a sense of this landscape. They're new words to people, for many people, but the underlying principles, what they're talking about, have been around for a long time, and I think it would be really great that we sort of talk about that with all of you.
Happy to have that conversation further. I could just quickly say the way I look at it is like restorative acknowledges that there's some way to restore a relationship or an experience, right? Like you can go back to a place where you all are both, that relationship, that initial relationship is restored, versus transformative is what, right, is in the words that you're transforming not only the relationship, but also the external environment that made the incident more likely to happen in the first place. So in my interpretation and in the work that I've seen happen, it has more of a broader structural and systemic framework than relying on changing just the individual or interpersonal relationships.
Yeah, I would agree with that broadly. Yes, absolutely.
I wanted Tina and then Corwin, and then I see Patrice, and then we should probably wrap up and do committee updates after that. So Tina, go ahead.
Okay, Alex, I just
Yes.
wanted to know what the policy was for hiring people who are exiting the system for misdemeanors and for federal charges. So to actually hire them at your group.
You
What's
mean
the policy?
at Impact Justice?
Yes.
There is no one we won't hire because of their prior contact with law enforcement, because of their prior incarceration. So the woman who runs the Homecoming Project, Tara Lawyer, spent 16 years incarcerated in the California State prison system. Was released about 3 years ago and started working for us roughly 3 months after she was released while still on parole. You know, and we actually have conversations about that, and we are working to try to find ways to support and to bring in staff in a variety of different roles, right, who have been formerly incarcerated. The California Justice Leaders Project, which I should do, I don't think you got to explain, but that is working with all formerly system-involved young people about, you might want to give just a little bit about that project, because I think it goes to sort of some of the values we have as an organization.
So technically speaking, Impact Justice has over 40 individuals that have been formerly incarcerated on our staff through the California Justice Leaders Project, because we hire through the AmeriCorps Project, because we hire justice involved or system impacted young adults to operate as mentors and navigators to young people that have left juvenile detention or juvenile hall. Are the criteria to become a California Justice Leader is someone that's been touched by the system. Most of them have been incarcerated. So that project is really about the credible messenger model, which is the individual that's experienced it is the individual that is best suited to really provide the services needed, particularly in reentry. So technically speaking, Impact Justice has a whole lot of folks that have been impacted by the system and formerly incarcerated. So when Alex said there's not a person that we wouldn't hire, we are also using some of our CJL members, which is the acronym for California Justice Leaders. They're actually currently applying for more internal positions at Impact Justice. So, you know, our philosophy really is the idea that it takes multiple people, multiple perspectives to really get to solutions and recommendations and resolution. And we don't shy away from that fact. And we're, as you can see, very open about who we hire, why we hire them, and integrate them into our work community, no different than we do ourselves.
All right, Corey?
How you doing? Alex, I wanted to ask, and Ms. Yusuf, I wanted to ask a question. So you talked about community-based programs that you've worked with. I don't know if you work with any DC-based community programs yet. I don't know. But how do you identify, you know, the community-based programs, and how do you identify justice impact people that you work with in Washington, DC? because I heard, you know, a lot about California. But, you know, I'm here in DC, like, I wanted to know, like, who are some of the organizations that you work with in DC? And some of the, you know, how do you gather the participants to do research with these clients in Washington, DC?
So we do projects all over the country, right? While we're based in California and Washington, D.C., we actually do have some staff. Our 9 sites for the restorative justice work, in each one of them, there are community-based organizations and individuals in the community that we're working with. Sometimes it's been an existing community-based organization, and sometimes we have to help stand them up. They're not all in California. We are working in Philadelphia, Durham, North Carolina, Miami, Florida, Nashville, Tennessee, and Mississippi, right? All east of the Mississippi. We have more demand and more interest, but we just don't have the resources of people to be able to do that work. We are not doing currently a research community-based project, I'm trying to think, in Washington, DC right now. Some of us have a variety of experience. My director of development, who's in DC, worked with a child advocacy center before coming to Impact Justice and has a strong network of relationships. A number of our other staff have also worked with nonprofits and community-based organizations in DC. And when I was in DC, one of my jobs was I ran the Washington, DC office for the Vera Institute of Justice, which put us with a number of different organizations. But candidly, for a lot of this work, the people we're going to rely on, and it's the way it should be. This is a commission, right? It's not, we're not the commissioners. It's all of you, right? Who do you think we should be talking to, right? You have opinions. Who do you think is relevant and critical to this conversation about what is the appropriate role, if at all, any, for law enforcement? We want to hear from you who those people are, right? We can, you know, we'll bring ideas to you. We have lots of relationships. We know lots of people, right? But, you know, if we just show up and say, here's the list, somebody's going to say, that's not my list. And they're right. It isn't your list. So we want to know what your list looks like. This is your community.
I wanted to say that because DC is very unique than states. And
Yep.
so, you know, it's really, I think, you know, community-based organizations is really important, but I think it's really important the way you connect or reach out to like DC-based community-based organizations, because we don't want to feel like a research lab, you know what I'm saying? Like a research lab, and how we pull data or how we connect to different community-based organizations in DC. So I think, yeah, that's another conversation of how we can handle of seeing what it is that we're looking for and working with a community-based organization in DC, and how do we work with that community-based organization. So that's all I had to say, though. Thank you.
And then Patrice.
Thanks. So I appreciate the conversation about all of the different inputs and what we should be learning and where we should be focused. I want to make sure that everybody's on the same page in terms of output, right? Like, I think someone listening to the last hour or so of conversation might think that this is like an exploratory committee or tasked with, you know, creating some sort of community-based dialogue about this. We are tasked with making specific legislative recommendations to the DC Council. We have a really short timeline to do that. And so I just wanted to like hear from you all about whether like you've done that before, and if you can help us streamline that process. I'm probably the most impatient person on the commission. And so I just want to know, like, how are we going to get this done quickly?
I will say I'm probably the most impatient person then not on the commission, to be candid about that, as my staff tells me all of the time. Jennifer, with a different person who hasn't spoken from my group.
And mute myself. I hear you, Patrice. And I think one of our goals is going to be to make sure that you're able to meet that core obligation, both to make legislative recommendations, and I would imagine also recommendations that don't fall narrowly within the confines of pure legislation. So whether those be more overarching or more particular about particular programs that might not have to flow specifically from particular legislation, I think you get what I mean. all the commissions that we worked with, the task forces and commissions, have all had to make those kinds of very specific, concrete recommendations. And I think while it's important to make sure that the voices of community-based organizations are engaged and heard through the process of your inquiry, you all are not conducting original research. That would be a very different endeavor. So I think it's about coming up with a process where those, well, let's be frank, the people for whom have been working on this for a very long time and for whom it matters greatly, that their ideas and their experiences are definitely at the foreground, and that you are paying attention to them and they're reflected in your findings and your recommendations. But again, it's not, this is not a research study per se.
Yeah, and Patrice and all of you know this, there's a lot to do. There's a lot to talk about. There's a lot to get done, right? You have a big mandate, right? You know, a lot of people are counting on it. This is a public hearing. I'm only looking at 20 people, but there's countless people who are watching this and reading about this and who may never even know that this commission exists, and still they're counting on you, right? That's what this work is about. And we're going to do everything we can to move this as expeditiously, as responsibly, to bring our best advice based on experience, right, and what we see to you, and to hope and to work with you to try to figure out what's possible, right?
I just want to jump in and underscore the point in terms of us making this a seamless process and really getting to the work that the commission is about. I'm sure you've done your due diligence with regard to taking a look at Washington, D.C., more particularly our police department here as well. But we really would like to get your input on best practices. And so I'm sure you're coming to us. That's very much a part of your toolkit. I'll just say it that way. So I would hope that you will be very forthcoming with us very early on, while we do have 5 subcommittees at this point. And I think we'll kind of get to some of this through our subcommittees. But we just really want to hear from you. If some of the practices of the DC Police Department are obsolete or obsolescent, if you will, we want to hear that information from you early on. Just unload with us early on so that we can have that information. You've already unpacked it for us. We can really get to the essence of our work. So I would just ask, when you start meeting with us as subcommittees, you share some of that with us early on.
You have our commitment to do that.
Thank
That's
you.
our great, you have our commitment.
All right, I think I see Samantha really quick, but then we have to move on for committee updates because I don't want to keep going too long on this.
Absolutely. This is a wrap-up question. Just want to know next steps. Some of the committees already have like a list of projects and tasks that you all can get started on. What's the best way to do that?
Bethany, or do you want me to?
Yeah, I was just going to say our goal is to get face time with each of you, and maybe the best way to start that is to do it on a committee basis, to kind of exchange that information. If you already have outlined your priorities and kind of already have an idea of kind of marching orders, then that's a good place for us to start kind of at our initial conversation. So in as much as committees don't have that, then we hope to be in the room to support that process of outlining the priorities and kind of a plan of attack. Did I miss anything there, Alex?
No, except as I said at the beginning, we're going to send out in the next day or two a list of who we are, some bios, some contact information, and as best we can, we're going to begin. We have to sort it out on our end a little bit to set up one-on-one time with each of you, right? Give you a sort of, a candid space to be able to, as I said, what are you hoping from all of this? I mean, and what do you think is possible? What do you think are the challenges? What do you think are the greatest opportunities, right? How do you measure, success is a complicated word too, but how do you measure success at the end of all this, right? How is something meaningfully done for the community that you care about at the end of this commission's work, right? Our goal is to make this commission not just get to the finish line, but to get to the finish line with something, right, that can carry forward beyond the life of this commission. That's the real goal of a successful commission for me, right? It's not just saying here's our report, doesn't it look beautiful, right? We agreed or disagreed or kind of agreed, whatever that is, but it is, what is the life beyond the completion date, right? Is it taken up by the council in a meaningful way? Do your constituents, right, your personal, the people you answer to in your life, it might be family, it might be a civic group, it might be the work that you do? Does this resonate with them? Do they find this to be meaningful? Does it break through some of the log jams and the blocks that are there for real reform and real change, right? Commissions come and go all the time. Fewer, in my view, are really successful. I think we have a track record of helping them to be successful, but that's not a guarantee. You know, you're only as good as the next thing you do, not as the one you did. Our goal is to work with you and to make this a successful, something successful that goes beyond the four corners of the calendar that you're working within.
Great. Thank you for all that, and I appreciate all the questions from commissioners. I thought as a quick next step, if somebody from each of the committees, one of the co-chairs, could sort of discuss what they've done so far and just give a brief overview of sort of the committee work and where you're headed, so that way the full commission can sort of get a sense of what's going on with the committees. And I figured we could start off with the Assessing and Expanding Violence Reduction Efforts Committee, and then we'll go from there if that sounds all right with people. And I will defer to either Sultan or Lashunda for the Assessing and Expanding. I don't know if Sultan's on right now. Yes, he is.
Yeah, so we are hopefully getting a few speakers who can talk about more of the community work that has been done in this area. We had some really great speakers about 2 weeks ago. And so we are also looking for some data. I've got to pull the list of some of the data that the committee members requested. They were hoping that the staff would help pull some of that. And so now that the team is on, we're hoping to move some of that stuff forward.
Yeah, and I would just note, so one of some of the folks that were brought in for one of the committee meetings for violence reduction efforts were from Office of Attorney General and Alliance for Concerned Men, who are both, of course, Office of Attorney General has the Cure the Streets program, which is based on the Cure Violence model. And then Alliance for Concerned Men is one of the grantees that works on that program. And I think it was a really great discussion. So as Sultan mentioned, I think we're looking to bring in more folks to have some of those really candid, frank discussions on sort of how those models are working, what the challenges have been, to get a better sense of how the commission can sort of make those recommendations stick. All right, I think might jump over then to Police and Schools / Policing Youth, and I'll leave that either to Samantha or Lashunda or both.
So I can start, and then Lashunda, feel free to add. So we have had 2 meetings thus far. Our first meeting, we really focused on grounding everyone in some of the demands that have been made throughout the country around removing police from schools, and heard from Advancement Project, and then also did some debrief around what that looks like here in DC, and talked a little bit about the DC landscape. Moving forward, we are going to continue to bring experts in, continue to be intentional about bringing youth voice into those conversations, and are working on securing a date for Professor Kristen Henney from Georgetown, who is, in short, an expert in all things youth justice, to talk to our committee, both about youth justice and school policing, but we are also going to extend an invitation to the full commission in the event that you all are doing any work that deals with young people, which I assume and hope that you all are. And so that is gonna be either next Wednesday or the following Wednesday, I believe, or this coming Wednesday. We give her 3 days. Stay tuned, and we will let you all know when that is, and hope that you all can be a part of that conversation. Lashunda, I don't know if you want to add anything.
No, I think that covers it. The only thing that I would add is that just for impact justice awareness is, you know, I know that in the title is like policing in schools, but I think also our committee is looking at policing and law enforcement contact with youth, period, in the district. So I think that's just important to reinforce that this isn't just about SROs. It's not just about the DCPS contract, but that's a part of it, but we're also looking at, what are the different touch points for young people here in the district, in school, out of school, in the community, at metro stops. And I think that gets to one of the things that one of the other commissioners mentioned, in terms of DC being unique in a lot of ways. Like, there's multiple ways in which young people are coming in contact with police and law enforcement here in the district that don't just include them being in schools. So that's something that I think our committee will be interested in tackling, in addition to some of the other things. So it's not just SRO centered or security guard centered, but that's the only thing I wanted to add.
And also, Lucinda, my apologies. I didn't see that you were on. I didn't know if there's anything else for the previous committee that you're also co-chairing.
Nope, I think you covered it, but thank you. Sorry, y'all, I'm on my phone, so.
A lot of boxes on this screen, that's all.
Anything else on that committee, Samantha or Lucinda? I don't think so, but just in case. No? Okay. So the next one I was gonna just toss it over to is the reforms to MPD practices. And I think Patrice, I probably shoot it over to you.
Sure. So we met twice, and we sort of divided our tasks into, sort of policing tactics, recruitment, and training as our subcategories. And some of the tactics that we started talking about are some of the DC Justice Lab proposals that were discussed at last Thursday's council hearing on policing. Those are listed at morethan-a-plaza.com. Kurt is taking the lead on training. Kent is taking the lead on recruitment, and we're happy to hear from the public about any of those areas. We're generating questions and best practices there. And anyone from that committee, please jump in and add anything I left out.
Else? Not hearing anything. I'm going to jump over then to the MPD accountability and oversight, and I think Naike.
Hi. So unfortunately we've met once, but we are having our second meeting this Thursday. We are supposed to have Mike Tobin, who is the executive director of the Office of Police Complaints, come and speak to us next week, and we'll definitely extend an invitation to the entire commission. I assume, some of that information that he provides or some of that discussion will be relevant to a lot of the work that you're doing, because it could involve, for example, the MPD practices and things like that, and how MPD deals with young people, et cetera. Then we also wanted to build in time to hear from various impacted groups in the community. So we sort of scheduled out meetings to include different focuses. So we're trying to break it down into what does accountability and discipline currently look like in DC? What are police officers doing in the community that requires accountability and discipline? What are the current limitations and barriers to accountability for officers in DC? What are some best practices and approaches to address accountability in other jurisdictions? And then what are local organizers, residents, and the people really doing the on the ground work requesting or recommending in terms of accountability for officers in the city? So we're trying to build in opportunities to hear from the community at various points, especially at the beginning of our conversation and towards the end. So I think we're going to be inviting, opening up our meetings to everyone because they're going to be public by default. And so we're happy to hear from all of you and attend some of your meetings as well.
All right, thank you, Naike. And then Matt, just finally, briefly, the building up non-police health and safety interventions. I don't know if is that also you, Patrice, that's taking a lead on that?
We've divided up all the responsibilities, but I don't mind being the spokesperson this week.
Okay.
So yeah, we've also met twice. The committee chair, Charles Allen, said that there's going to be a roundtable specifically on non-police emergency response in December. And so that's a really important and urgent area that we're organizing around, specifically responses to behavioral health, addiction, homelessness. We also have undertaken several other components, the NEAR Act being fully implemented, conflict resolution and restorative justice, neighborhood community mediation, police responses to immigrant communities, and building safe and just communities. I am eager to hear from anyone from the community on immigration in particular, and would welcome any meetings or input on that issue. And my email address is just patrice@dcjusticelab.org. And if anyone who's taking a lead on any of the other areas wants to add anything about what they're looking for or their timeline, please help me here. Thanks.
Any other comments on that committee from anyone that's on it? Not hearing anything. All right. Were there any other comments or questions regarding any of the committee work? Before opening it up, I'll note that I did send out the calendar, the commission calendar, and it should have the meeting information for all committees. So if you're wondering when a committee's meeting or what they're going to be discussing, please check the calendar to see what's on there first, and then please reach out to Impact Justice, and then they can reach out to me afterwards regarding any sort of information regarding, you know, content or anything like that, speakers. But yeah, are there any other comments or questions regarding the committee?
Question, are there any victim organizations in the District of Columbia that we should hear from? I mean, everything here seems, and I understand why, orientation towards not the victim, but are there victim organizations that we should hear from, if any such exist in the district?
Yeah, so we can and should, although I would caution us against drawing too binary a line between victim and perpetrator. I think that's just often not the reality, but we should definitely hear from people who.
I didn't get that. I didn't understand what you meant.
Someone who is victimized by violence today may perpetrate violence tomorrow, and it's often part of the same set of, you know, circumstances. And so it's not always that you will find that a lot of people who support victims and work for victims also recognize that. So we should hear from people who do that. But I'm just saying that you may hear from people that are not framed as representing victims, but in fact they do, because it's not as binary a line as we often think of it as.
Christy,
there's several homicide survivor organizations in the city that work with families of victims' families and all of that, and they've been around when the homicide was out of the world and have stuck with it and been there. So I can get the names of those organizations and then provide it to Blaine.
Good.
Oh, and this is LaShonda. Actually, Mr. Hampton, that's exactly where I was going to go. And I think Corey earlier had mentioned this. I think that's part of why it's important to be DC specific and some of the outreach in terms of community organizations, grassroots organizations that are here in DC, because cross-victimization is real, right? We're talking a lot about the same communities, the same people. So just to reiterate what I think it was Corey, sorry, I can't see. And I think it was Mr. Hampton who just spoke, that they know who to point you to in answering some of these questions that are right here in DC and kind of understand the uniqueness of the district.
I would just echo Christy's comment that we absolutely should, and I can send around. DC actually has a victim assistance network that has, they catalog all the victim assistance organizations in the district, and there are a lot of them, and the commission should definitely consider which ones they would like to reach out to and who they'd like to hear from, and however inclusive you want to be, I think you can be. It's just a matter of sort of how you want to prioritize things, but definitely want to hear from folks who have been victims. So.
Yeah, no, and I should just note that, right, this is a DC commission, and we want to make sure that we do what we can to work with you to support and to lift up those voices, from DC, right? Because DC is unusual in some ways, but it is the people of DC fundamentally, different or not, that this commission's working to serve.
Great. With that, unless there's any other committee related questions, Samantha, I think I saw.
I don't know if this is committee or commission more broadly. It's about interpretation.
Oh, language interpretation or?
Both.
Both?
ASL and yes, so language, yes, ASL interpretation, and in my case, Spanish interpretation. And if it's happening on all commission and committee meetings, or if there's a way to request that.
You can make the request, and I'll have to see what we can do budget wise to see what rates are, because I can't remember off the top of my head. But I guess I would need to know just sort of if you would like to have it at committee meetings as much as possible, and then also full commission meetings as well, just so that way I can get a sense of how much that might cost, and then we can sort of go down that road.
Okay. Thank you. I do think that all commission meetings should at least have captioning in different languages. If we're not.
I agree. Is that not a requirement for DC? The public commissionings?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't think council has anything that's broad. I mean, they have closed captioning because the Office of Cable TV and Entertainment does that, but I don't think that they do anything in different languages, is my understanding. But I will definitely look into it and see what we can do and see how much we can make it happen at the different committee meetings as well.
Thank you, Lynn.
And thank you for bringing that up, Samantha. I appreciate it. All right, then I was going to turn it over to Christy or Robert Bob to do any sort of miscellaneous updates that you might have before we do next steps and adjournment.
Yes, we have one substantive update. And that's an update with the request that we made to the internal audit. The internal auditor office, Ms. Patterson, and Christy and I and Patrice Sultan are scheduled to meet with her.
Night K.
With Night K, with her office on October 31st. And we'll report back to the commission. This is a follow-up to the request that we made to the city auditor with respect to the investigation of the police shooting that took place earlier this year. With that, that's the only update. I want to thank Impact Justice for its report and introduction tonight, and definitely want to thank the members of the commission and the various committees, and I can ensure Impact Justice that our commission members will be, our commission and our committees will be and are actively engaged, and look forward to working with you all and your team.
Well, I want to tell you, we have been really looking forward to this first opportunity to meet with you all. We are looking forward to working with you. You really are the experts. I think most of you know that already. And we value it, and we're really excited about what the days and weeks ahead hold. So thank you for letting us have this opportunity to work with all of you. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. If there's nothing else, no other business to come before the commission, is there a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Support? Been moved and seconded. So the meeting is adjourned until, when is our next meeting, Blaine, of the full commission?
The next meeting of the full commission is on November 16th at 6:30 p.m. It's on the commission calendar, and also for any folks that are watching, it's on the commission's website as well. If you go to dcpolicereform.com, you can go to the calendar tab and see any of the dates of the commission and committee meetings.
Okay. Christy, you have any parting comments?
No, just it's good to see everybody. I look forward to seeing you all again soon. Thank you, Alex, and your entire team. All of you for being here tonight. It was really great to hear from you. Take care, everyone. I'll see y'all soon.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.